Hello and welcome back to the Wheel Talk podcast. My name is Abby Mickey and I'm here with Gracie, Georgie, and Loren. It's a full crew today to talk about Tour de Suisse. It was 4 days, but jam-packed with hot topics, plus a couple other news bits and how good's Minute of Madness regarding the Giro change of date.
How we doing, team? It's good to have the whole crew back together. Everyone's looking very good tonight. Let's get going.
Loren?
Oh, this is great. I'm the one in a singlet now, and my two co-hosts from Down Under are in jumpers. This is fantastic.
No. A cropped, by my own hand, cropped long sleeve t-shirt.
By my own hand. And Abby Mickey number 2, aka Gracie.
Yeah, signed into your account, but yeah, that was very Melbourne, Georgie.
Yeah, it's very north of the river. You know, I'm too far south at the moment. I need to get myself north.
North of the river.
I don't do cropped anymore. I don't know about you guys, but that's my era done for that particular fashion trend.
I do cropped only because sometimes my washing ends up shrinking, and then I end up with a crop top. And it's normally because of harness. And I don't know how many times I've told him about the different settings on the washing machine. It still doesn't seem to click. I'm like, if you just stick with cold, this will never happen. But yeah, I do have some cropped tops now. It's not by choice.
My shirt is also by my own hand cropped. I love a crop.
Love a crop. By our own hand. The only way to do it.
Yeah, you know, if you got a really short torso and really long legs, like a normal length t-shirt just looks really odd.
I mean, I have the opposite body proportions. My mom says I've got the duck's disease. Long body, short legs.
The duck's disease.
My mom calls me the gangles. I've got the gangles. I've got gangly limbs.
Yeah, I love it.
Oh, amazing. Okay, we've got so much to talk about today. We're going to talk about the great handlebar debate, and we're going to talk about the Giro. We're going to talk about a little bit about Pyrenees, but the biggest topic of the weekend was definitely Tour de Suisse. It was an incredible 4 days of racing. Right from the get-go, we had some of the best riders in the world hitting out, trying to win the stage. Some fantastic courses and some I guess you could call it an upset, or you could call it kind of a changing of the guard. Just definitely a lot to look forward to with the upcoming Giro and Tour. So let's talk Tour de Suisse. Stage 1 was a hilly one, and not many hills, but some significant ones. We had a pretty incredible move by Sarah Gigante, put a lot of pressure on a reduced group after Movistar had done a good chunk of the pulling. A group of 5 went over the top of the climb together. Sarah Gigante, Kasia Niewiadoma-Finney, Niamh Fisher-Black, Marlen Reusser, and Demi Vollering. On the descent, which was kind of a pedaling descent, which made a huge difference in the group, Reusser attacked, Vollering followed, Kasia Niewiadoma, to her utter shock, could not hold on to the wheel. Her and Niamh were chasing, and Reusser and Vollering took the stage with some very interesting banter on the way, which we will talk about. So Reusser took the first stage. The second stage was another really interesting one with a breakaway that stayed to the end. It ended up being Amber Crack with a solo victory from the break, but behind the GC riders were not about to sit idly by. They were attacking each other, and Kasia Niewiadoma especially was trying to find some time that she had lost on the day before. She found a couple seconds, but in the end it was mostly just a really good show that day, and we'll dive a bit more into that. Stage 3, Kristen Faulkner, solo breakaway for a really long time, but the stage ended up coming down to a reduced bunch sprint won by Elisa Balsamo, barely. Don't ever stop pedaling before the line, folks. But she took the stage just narrowly ahead of Misha Bredewald, who had an incredible bike throw. And then the fourth stage was another hilly one, another one where the big name riders hit out for the stage win and for the overall. And Reusser took her second stage win of the weekend and the overall, and had some fantastic post-race comments. So really a lot to dig into. I think the biggest takeaway for me is how well Reusser not only rode the race tactically, how strong she was, her confidence, but also that she said after the race that she is not targeting the Tour. She's hoping to go for the pink jersey at the Giro and see how her form is going into the Tour after having that be her target. She was adamant that she is not on the form of her life, but that she is really hoping to win the Giro, which was her goal last year before her year got kind of derailed by the crash at the Tour of Flanders and then COVID.
Yeah, I like that in her post-race interview, she was being classic Reusser and just being like, stop asking me the same dumb question over and over again in different ways. She was also saying, like, I'm still on the way up and, I'm really pleased with this, really happy, really enjoying the moment. But, like, I feel like I've still got so much more to give. And she was really excited about that. Like, she was really looking ahead rather than wanting to reflect too much back. I think she kind of wants to just put it down to some bad luck, some blips, but nothing to like harp on about, and just, stay humble, stay grateful, stay hungry. I felt like that was really shining through in her words.
Yeah, she seems like an extremely pragmatic individual. And maybe that comes from her like medical background as well, and medical training there. But I was just joyous that we finally have a rider who can interview with some personality and give it back to the press a bit, which was awesome. And it's really good for the sport as well. Like those grabs are what bring in the eyeballs. So it's, and then people invest in the stories of the athlete, they invest in the athlete themselves, and then they get to start watching more bike racing. So I think we need to see more of this personality injected into these interviews, not just like, oh yeah, legs were good today, or legs were not good today. Like if I hear that one more time, or like my legs were super. Don't use the adjective super. No more. Not allowed.
Yeah, you can thank the Dutch riders for the word super, I think. But yeah, no, I agree with everything you guys have said. This is Reusser's like first full season where she's been in this leadership position because, of course, last year was marred by injury and illness and everything sort of was thrown at her. But I think we were talking about in a podcast the last time we were all together, the fact that she always showed the ability and the characteristics of being able to pull out performances like this. And now that since she's moved to Movistar, she's got the support behind her from the team. They've built a really good team, I think, around her as well. And I have no doubt she's going to be the rider to contest Elisa at the Giro.
Yeah, I can't wait for that battle. I think Elisa and Marlen are kind of cut from the same cloth, and I'm going to swear, so sorry, Mum, but they're both no bullshit. They're really just about the bike racing. So I'm stoked to see what that battle looks like. Just by two out-and-out bike racers who are both very smart.
I think in terms of characteristics of like their rider profiles, if we think about it a bit, like I was reading some threads. I don't often go on Reddit, but sometimes it's interesting just to read what people are writing from the extended network, not just the Escape Collective on Discord, about the types of rider, the type of rider that people think Marlen is. And yeah, you can see what she did. We'll get into it, but on stage 4 is like she can just set that blistering pace that puts absolutely everyone under pressure. That the riders who like to do that on-off attacking, Acacia comes to mind. It sort of neutralizes that ability of those type of riders to do that sort of attacking. I feel like Elisa, the way that she's developed as an athlete, what we saw a few years ago is she would turn on like that diesel engine and sort of get her way back to the Demis of the peloton and the Annas when we were in those more mountain stages. But I feel now like Elisa is a rider who can do that on and off better on the climbs. So that's what I'm sort of curious how Marlen will approach that in the Giro.
She rode the Tour de Suisse like flawlessly. Like from the very first stage, she picked that downhill, and it wasn't just that she rode it so well. The course was also really well suited to her, which is something that I find interesting about her decision to target the Giro versus the Tour. I feel like the Tour this year, we don't have as many high mountain climbs or long climbs as we have in the past. This year, it is more of a poppy kind of race. They've really tailored the race to like a rider like, I don't know, Pauline Ferrand-Prévot. So for Reusser, looking at how she rode Tour de Suisse and the courses at Tour de Suisse, it's fascinating to me which one she decided to target. And I don't know if that's because the team, wants someone like Liane Lippert to target the Tour, which, Liane Lippert of 2023, absolutely, you know. And I hope that she can get back to that level because she's such an exciting rider. But she just really, she knew exactly where she needed to attack on that downhill. It was a pedaling downhill. She's got so much power. For the rest of the race, she was really in control. I mean, it wasn't like she was in control of the race. She was in control of the other riders as well. She had Vollering just totally pegged. She knew exactly what she was going to do. She knew every move. And after the second stage, when Niewiadoma was able to get a little bit of time, not enough time for anyone to be that concerned because she'd lost almost 2 minutes the day before. But when she was able to get a little bit of time back, Reusser really like put it on Demi that it was her acting weird, her words, that had lost them a little bit of time to Niewiadoma. But she knows Demi inside and out, having been her teammate for years and ridden for her, which makes this whole, I'm going to call it a rivalry. And I'm really sorry to Marlen because she does not want to be involved in a rivalry, but it makes it just adds an extra layer that is very like, you know, limited series on Apple Plus esque.
I was just going to make a quip because I'm good at those. The media love drama. So like we can call it rivalry by another word, but
we are the media and we love drama.
yeah. So I think you can't really script this any better if you're a media house. Like when you've got two ex-teammates who are now on the same level racing each other and one beats the former champion on the team, then like the helper beats the former helper now beats the champion, or like the what's the Star Wars reference?
Student becomes the master.
That's the one. Probably not Star Wars. Probably
that's a good one. That's a good one. Let's hear
probably Karate Kid.
Appreciate it.
Oh, yeah, maybe Karate Kid. Wax on, wax off. Yeah, that's same day.
I like the storyline in that Reusser's now not going to specifically target the Tour like some of the other big hitters, because we can keep this storyline going for a while. And I like that she's actually been smart in targeting races that A, suit her, but B, ones that Vollering isn't necessarily targeting. So she's building her brand, she's building her value, she's building her resume. And we're going to see this rivalry, quote unquote, play out over a number of years, not just this year.
That's a really smart point. She's laying that foundation really nicely. She's building herself independent of Vollering. She already did that by moving to Movistar. But now and Vollering's now in a different team as well. But I think we're starting to see with this like democratization of like quality rider across the peloton with the musical chairs that happened last year. We're starting to see like these key players start to emerge, and I almost got a bit of a Game of Thrones-esque like regions playing in my mind as to like where, like we've got like the North with I don't know who the North would be.
Jumbo, sorry, Visma and SD Works.
Visma, SD Works in the North, or like, and King's Landing is like FDJ. Yeah. Dawn is Movistar. Like, you know, it's Discord can have fun with that one, but I'm seeing like we've got like distinct verticals now within the peloton that we can start to play off against each other in these epic storylines, because that's what sport is, right? It's about all the stories that we can create and that we get to see.
And I think like Reusser is really strategic in how she's probably planned her season and knows that she is, not to say she's not a Tour contender, and I think there's been a lot of debate about this and the parcours for this year, but a lot of the discussion is that it really does suit Demi. Like this is going to be a Demi sort of Tour. Just how it back ends from stage 5 onwards is, you know, with that HC climbs, and they're longer climbs, they're different climbs. Like Tour de Suisse was a really good race, but it's not a reflection of what you can expect in a Tour de France Femme. So for Marlen, to her point, like she is still developing as this lead rider and probably has big ambitions of a Tour victory down the track. But right now the goal is first the Giro. So I really believe when she says like the Tour is not the goal, because I don't think she's the sort of person that would just go, oh yeah, no, the Tour is not the goal, but it actually is the goal. Looking at it, I mean, I think we can probably have a bit of a discussion as well, maybe towards the end of the podcast, of the lessons learned from, now we've had a series of tours and this is the last one, I believe, before we head to the Tour de France. Well, before the Giro and then the Tour de France Femme. So
she said on Swiss TV that the Giro and the World Championship time trial were her two big targets of the year. And she said she would still be racing the Tour, but that's not a goal for her. So I think she's curious how she's going to be carrying the form into the Tour. And she's not completely ruling out having it be a race where she goes for general classification, especially like if the team doesn't have another option for somebody at the Tour and given the form that she's on. But once the Giro wraps up, regardless of how that goes, her main focus is the World Championship time trial. And she obviously didn't get to race last year because she had long COVID and had complications from COVID. So she wasn't able to race her home World Championships, which had been a huge goal. And we all know what happened at the World Championships the year before, where she had to step off the bike mid-race. So this is going to be, this is going to be the year where she's really targeting those World Championships and in a completely different headspace than she was in the last time she was able to race a World Championship time trial. I think the conversation about Reusser and Demi, which we should talk a little bit more about Demi, because obviously she was a bit off the mark at this race, and she blamed fatigue and really looked haggard after the final stage. But the conversation about the two of them and the riders that they are this year goes hand in hand with the fact that SC Works Pro Time was basically non-existent in the race. Like they had Martelak up in the breakaways. Steffi rode a really good race for being so fresh. They got second on two stages with Martelak and on the second to the stage with Amber Crack winning from the breakaway. And they had Bredewald coming second to Balsamo. But they didn't have Kopecky or Van der Breggen at the race. And for such an important kind of tune-up race before the Giro and the Tour, that was a really notable omission, I thought, from the start list.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up as well, because I was just checking to see the last time Van der Breggen raced, and it was it Azulia, I think, something like that, which is now, exactly a month ago. Do we know if she's lining up? I keep checking the Giro start list, but it hasn't changed so much over the past 2 weeks.
I mean, one of them has to be racing the Giro.
Well, I know Kopecky is not.
Yeah, she's all in for the Tour, which is why I was pretty surprised that she didn't race Swiss. So she's raced 2 stage races this year, and both of them came up a little short. The last one was Vuelta a Burgos, where she was 11th in the GC, so definitely not what she was capable of last year. And I would have thought that she would want to, after Burgos, she would have gone home, reassessed, gone to altitude. We know she went to a training camp with SC Works Pro Time with most of the Tour de Suisse team and Van der Breggen. They did some recons in France and had a training camp there. So I was surprised not to see her at Tour de Suisse so that she could kind of gauge where her fitness was compared to Vollering, who's going to be like her main rival at the Tour. And we have no idea how she is coming into the like pre-tour block of the summer, whereas we know where most of the other contenders are. So it's kind of an interesting one, because you'd think obviously Kopecky of 2024, you would say that she's a Tour contender no matter what. But Kopecky of 2025, we really don't know. We have no idea where she sits at the moment in the kind of peloton hierarchy of fitness.
Well, according to the internet, there's pretty much a 2-month gap between her last race and the Tour de France, which is, almost unheard of in cycling, to have gaps that long between races in season. So,
well, women's cycling, particularly with the size of these teams.
Yeah, exactly. So it's interesting, the approach. Not that it's wrong or incorrect, or it's just an interesting lead into a publicly made goal. The positives, though, in not going to races like Swiss is to not match up against your rivals, particularly Demi Vollering, and not add fuel to the fire of the public conversation, but more than that, not potentially degrade your confidence going into your biggest goal. So maybe that's the decision that her and her team have made, in that that's what she wants, to build her own confidence, do some good training blocks and roll the dice that way rather than rolling it in the way of more racing and potentially crashing or losing.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a huge shift, right, from a couple years ago where you would really have all the best riders going to all the races because there was, smaller teams even, but like less World Tour racing. And it was more often we got to see like most of the big names lining up against each other. And I feel like we're really in this new era of women's cycling where riders are strategically picking and choosing which races they can do, and the teams are allowing them to do that. And this is a kind of an extreme example. And obviously, I think a large chunk of it has to do with her spring season and her knee injury and how she's rehabbing going into the rest of the season and her biggest goals, which are the Tour and the World Championships. So it's just fascinating to me how much things have changed and how differently riders are approaching their seasons nowadays.
And to be continued in How Good's Method of Madness.
Yeah. I think it's almost a good segue into terms of like the emerging talents and how from the tours that we've had leading up to this point, that there have just been so many riders that have been showing themselves. I think we can talk a lot about how great I thought Niamh Fisher-Black raced in Swiss. I mean, huge step up. This season has just been fantastic for her. The move to Trek was obviously a really good move in terms of her development. Maybe it came at the right time of her career as well. And you can see she's more confident in her abilities, and we'll see more from her. But like being there, mixing it up, and Abby, your piece that you wrote on Escape, we saw particularly on that last stage the contenders that I think when we move into again the Giro, the Tour de France Femme, there's going to be, I don't know, more than 5 riders that we'll be talking about as real contenders. And I do wonder from the tactics that we have been seeing in these stage races how much team tactics is going to play into those podium positions at the end of the Tour and the eventual win, because we need to discuss Demi and the sort of way that she has been racing. There's been a lot of commentary that maybe sometimes on the bike, when she's forced into making those instinctual decisions, that she's not so good under pressure, and she can be sort of goaded into doing things that a rider who panics less wouldn't do. So I think that's an interesting discussion in itself. And it was funny because I was chatting with one of the DSs just at a Belgian race a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about radios and communication and those things. And what they found is just that lack of instinct in riders. Some have it, like your Lieselot Decroix is a great example. She doesn't need that radio in her ear to tell what to do in that moment. But there's a delay in the coverage. So what they're watching on the coverage in that moment, it's like they don't really know what's going on. So Georgie, you're the last one to leave the peloton, so you can speak to this. But I think that's kind of what we're seeing with Demi when she has to make that, decision in the moment. She's just...
I think like most riders have that killer instinct to make the decision. I think they do it quite well. I think radios, depends on your DS, I think. When it comes to the use, I think a radio is fine, but it's all about how you use it, right? So if you've got a DS who allows for that, like who actually encourages that instinctual go with your gut kind of mentality of racing, I think you can still use a radio and have that. I just don't know what's going on in Demi's ear.
I think for Demi, I mean, this is part of what I was talking about with Reusser, right? Like she really exploited Demi's lack of race savviness, especially on the final stage where there were attacks by Niewiadoma-Finney. I have to get used to calling her by her new hyphenated last name. Niewiadoma-Finney was attacking, and Reusser really forced Demi to chase it down. And then as soon as they caught on, she attacked to take the stage, and at that point Demi was empty, right? And Reusser would have known that Demi isn't super savvy when it comes to race tactics and those split-second decisions, and she said in her post-race interview that Demi panics. And I think that the beginning of the year went so well because she was in such good form. She was riding the high of moving to a new team, but now we're kind of in the crunch time where everything's leading into the Giro and the Tour, and people are coming into their peaks, and there's a lot more stress, a lot more pressure on Demi going into this block of racing, given how last year went. And I think that she has always been so strong that she's never needed to learn how to tactically race a bike. Plus, she's been on SC Works Pro Time, where up until last season, there was really always somebody to pick up the slack because they had such a well enough on the tactical side to be able to keep up with riders who are matching her strength now, like Reusser.
Yeah, she can no longer, like, you know, like, there's no longer the saying of like what's hide a multitude of sins. Like, everyone, like Demi was here and everyone's kind of reached her.
Yeah.
So she can no longer just outpower someone on a climb or whatever. She can't be lazy with her race tactics in the way that she thinks in a race, and she can't just think, I have the strongest legs in this race, therefore I can ride away. And I think that's probably why she looked haggard at the end of Swiss, because this is probably the most stark realization that she's had, where like she can't do this anymore.
I think she also may have been like a little bit sick or something at the end of Swiss, because I feel like she was so off her game that I don't think that she was, you know, like 100% on the final stage of Swiss. But I do think that she seems like, it seems like watching her race, and especially on the final day, she gets, if anything goes wrong, if one thing goes wrong, she just loses it. Like, all the marbles are gone and she can't collect them all back into the bag to be able to race her bike in like a way that is productive.
Yeah, and she's also isolated, right? So she was in that break. She's up the road with like a group of 5, and she's the only FDJ rider, so she doesn't have a teammate there to kind of lean on and provide that support. Which I think it's, yes, you've got tactical support when you got a teammate with you, but I think for Demi, it's also emotional support to like see someone there and optically have someone there who can help her when it's just her. I think and something does go wrong, she has nothing to fall back on.
Can we just have a quick chat about the tactics around on the topic of getting information from radios, what we think about that decision, or what that information we got about why they took on stage 1 a bonus second sprint each as an agreement? Because
that was an interesting.
I find, I actually, I can see the logic in it, but I also don't think that it was necessary in that moment, like in that situation, to do that. So I'm interested to see if there was something I missed there, if there was an importance for that, and just to discuss why that was actually maybe not a good tactic.
Yeah, so what Gracie's talking about is there was a Tissot kilometer time bonus situation going on where they had 2 time bonuses set on in the final chunk of the race. And it was 3, 2, 1 bonus seconds on the line. And when Demi and Reusser were off the front together, they each took one of the 3-second bonuses. So riding into the finish, they were on equal time. And Reusser said after the stage that the reason that they had done that is because the directors in the car were nervous. So the DSs were calling each other on the phone and came to the agreement that they would each take a time bonus so that there was no additional infighting in their duo as they rode to the finish line.
But what were they nervous about? Were they nervous about not winning the stage because someone else was going to win it? Like they wanted them to keep working together?
Yeah, maybe the cooperation between the two of them. Yeah.
It was a race arguably won on time bonuses, in maybe not right at the end, but it was, a pretty tight race. So, why wouldn't you try and get the upper hand as early on as you can?
Especially when such a good point, because on stage 4 it was stage 4 where they were really going for it, right? Instead, I think like it did come down to the time bonuses. You would argue it would have if Demi on that last day, like you could see what was going to happen, but everyone I think watching the television was going, "What are you doing right now? We all know what's about to happen, and this won't come down to the final sprint anymore." Like, so I don't know, Gracie, it is a good point. And I do wonder if the DSs were like, well, let's just fight for the win today instead of Demi and Marlen looking at each other and then essentially the riders behind coming back. But that's strange. I don't know if I've ever heard of that before. Not that I've I have
No.
much to do with some cars, but calling another DS up.
But that's what happened at Omloop too. That's also what happened at Omloop at Newsblad, where like FDJ and SD Works team DSs were calling each other like, are you going to chase? Because we're not going to chase. Like, you should chase. And then the breakaway won.
But yeah, like this is the opposite extreme of that. Like that was a huge fuck up. But then this is like, well, they're the two best riders in the race. It would be different if it was Reusser and Cassia together. You'd think, okay, that does make sense because if if Vollering's not with them, you need to work together because this is your golden opportunity to get time on one of the other strongest riders. But, you know, like Cassia, she's doing well, but even without that time loss from the descent, like on paper is still not going to beat Vollering and Vollering and Reusser in this race. So like, who were the threats? Why were they nervous? Why would they waste the opportunities to get those time bonuses? Like, I don't know. I think it's like, I think that race radios are important. I think like overall we need them. I agree with Georgie. I think actually most riders do know how to think to some extent for themselves on the bike. I think as a rider, you have to acknowledge that it's ultimately your responsibility as to what decisions you make out there on the road, regardless of what's going on in your ear. And I think that's where the distinction gets lost on a lot of riders. And yeah, but then in this particular situation, that's when you don't listen to what's going on in your ear because that was a bit dumb. And I've had directors tell me things in my ear that I didn't agree with, and I went along with them and it didn't work out. And then I kicked myself after. I was, of course, annoyed at the director, but I was more annoyed at myself because I knew better.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point. And I think we can also talk to, like, there was audible discussion between the two of them in that stage when they were riding together. So there was clear frustration between the two, and perhaps there was a fear that there's something going on that we're not seeing, like something behind camera or off the bike that is between the two of them that the directors are aware of. And so therefore they had to kind of keep the waters fairly steady prior to the last 10K. Then they could really fight it out. But they wanted to keep the cohesion there as long as possible. And to do that was to give each a bonus sprint. Because that, like, there was audible and public frustration between the two. Like, Marlen was not having a bar of it.
It was pretty hilarious, yeah.
You have a sore tummy? You still have to ride, Demi. You still have to ride.
Then you ride. I am riding. I mean, I think we're being hard on Demi, but it's, you know,
because
she's the best rider in the peloton. Like,
exactly.
Yeah, she's phenomenal, and going into the tour, she will be the number one favorite to win the GC. And it's things like this that kind of humanize her a bit, that she's, you know, you got to have a weakness somewhere, and most people when stacked up against her don't have her climbing ability, and they might be tactically better. And that's part of bike racing, is like, if you're decent at everything, then you win. But if you're like if you really need to work on your tactical prowess, but you're really, really strong, then like someone's going to get you there. And here Reusser was matched physically and tactically just better.
Yeah. And in defense of Vollering, like, I wasn't expecting her to be on top form because she hasn't done a lot already this season. She's had a couple of big peaks already, and of course the Tour is her probably biggest goal of the year. So like, actually she shouldn't be going super well right now, and I'm not sure really what her training is towards some of these kinds of races, but yeah, like, you'd assume that they wouldn't be picking her for the Tour de Suisse. They would just like that as a bonus win, probably. And that is a tough position for her to be in, because they've got some great talent on that team that, you know, I think we'll talk more about. But yeah, she holds most of the pressure still because she is their star. And I think it's a trap that would be easy to fall into, to get excited or to feel like you owe the team something to show up to these kinds of races and have to win them. So I'm sure it would have hurt a lot for her to not win, especially on roads that she trains on. Like, that would kind of feel like a home race to her. But you can't win everything, even when you're that talented. It's just, you know, it's there's a cost somewhere, and you don't want that cost to be the Tour. You'd rather lose Tour of Suisse than the Tour de France.
Yeah, and I think like FDJ-Suez they're still the best team in the peloton right now. Like they won a stage with Amber Crack, but also got third on that same stage with Elise Chabbey. And then the exact same day they were winning a stage of Pyrenees with Ali Wollaston. So, you know, they're still one of the best teams. And I was really disappointed when like there was a start list the morning before the race that I wrote my preview based on, and then it changed annoyingly in the evening before the next morning before the stage started. That included Labous, and I was really looking forward to see how she was going in Tour de Suisse, because you would think that the team is letting her go for like GC at the Giro, because obviously Demi's not going to do the Giro, and they can't just put everything on Demi. They can't just be like, hey, every single GC that we want to win is on Demi. That's unsustainable and not good for the rest of the riders on the team either. So that they didn't have either Labous or Avita Music at Swiss, I was kind of like, I mean, Demi clearly looked like she wasn't loving it by the end, and maybe part of that was that she was losing. They could have brought one of their other GC riders here, and it would have been a really good opportunity for one of them as well.
Yeah, which we saw with AG.
Yeah, great segue. Fantastic segue. I think one of the biggest takeaways for me at this race was we have Sarah Gigante back and clearly on very good form. She looked amazing on the climbs. But you also had Urska Zegart, who had, I'm going to say, a breakthrough performance at the race, especially on the first stage. But she finished the race with a really good result overall. She was 7th in 2023 at this race and 5th this year. So she bettered her best ever World Tour performance by 2 spots. And neither rider is like you would maybe choose to follow on a descent, but I think that the talent of both of these riders, just AG and Shirin Soudal, if you look at them, you also look at Jacine Gerke, you also look at Ashley Moen-Passio, like they have the best climbing team in the peloton, almost second maybe only to FDJ-Suez.
And they've got the emerging talent of like Laura Descapa, who's going to be phenomenal. And just in general, I think they had a really good tour. It was good to see some of the riders putting their names out there again, like Julia Borgström. Overall, I think they're building a really good team around Kim Lecourt. I think she has big ambitions for the Tour de France Femme. But great to see Sarah Gigante there, because I think if they line up with a Sarah in form and Urska and a Kim, they're going to probably walk away with a stage win and maybe a podium.
Yeah, I was like stoked to see, as always, like to see both Urska and Sarah get up there. Both have had the individual struggles in the bunch. So it's, I think it's a real show of tenacity and persistence to see them both stepping up to the plate there and taking ownership of their riding ability. And I think this should give them confidence moving forward.
I mean, I think they're both improving like massively year on year. And you can see that with Urska, and just if you just look at her, results every year, she just gets a little bit better every year, and she's still quite young. So relatively to, women's cycling. So it's like,
Urska, if you're listening, you're a spring chicken. You're young.
Spring chicken. Speaking of spring chickens.
No, don't tell me that there are riders who listen to this podcast. It makes me so nervous. Like I get so nervous. I don't know, because we have to talk about them.
No, but I mean actual spring chickens, like Marianne Bunel.
Oh, I thought you mean like spring chickens, like bok bok. Just kidding.
Young riders. Okay. It came down to the last stage for the QOM jersey that Gigante was going for. But obviously with Urska, fighting for that 5th position, that takes priority over the mountains jersey. But that was, fun to watch. I always love the races within the race. I always say that. But for the young rider classification between Bernal and Chioboko was really good to see. And actually, I think Picnic Post NL, they have a really, really young team, but definitely some huge emerging talents there that I'm very excited about for the future.
Yeah, and they obviously finally took a win at Tour of Britain because they've had a doozy of a season so far. Just with Charlotte O'Cool not being quite on the same level this year, and Pfeiffer Georgie's still kind of working back from her horrendous injuries from the Tour crash last year. So they're still chipping away at it, and I think that things are kind of clicking into place for the second half of the season for them. Or at least you would hope, because we want to see, we want to see more teams on top as we go into the Tour, so we have the best battles at the best race in the world. All right, well, the Tour de Suisse was fantastic, and I think it can get everyone a bit more excited about the Giro and the Tour to come, because it looks like we're going to have some really good battles at both races. But elsewhere in the world, we had the Tour Féminine des Pyrénées, and this is the one that a couple years ago, there was some safety concerns, to say the least, but the race is still going, and we had a top-notch field show up to this race. Ali Wolfson won the first stage in a reduced bunch sprint, and then Ostalaza, the Spanish national champion riding for Laboration Cucha Fundación Euskadi, she took the second mountain stage with a 20-kilometer breakaway, and it was basically like a 20-kilometer climb. It was like 2 climbs basically with a plateau in the middle, and the final climb was like 7.1 kilometers, I think, off the top of my head. But it really, like, basically 20 kilometers of climbing at 5% average. So she took that stage, and with it, basically the overall friend of the pod, Brody Chapman, took the final stage. Love to see it. And just another kind of tune-up race before the Giro. Brody said she'll be going to the Giro. You can look forward to some Brody Chapman audio diaries, actually. And yeah, just a race worth keeping an eye on because of who was there and that there were mountains involved with what's coming.
Absolute breakthrough performance. If you haven't been paying attention to Nadia Gontova, the Canadian rider, she came second on GC by just 20 seconds. And I would say that, the form that Ostaloza has shown this year, she could be like a top 10 contender for the Tour de France Femme.
She's signed to Labrol until 2027, actually.
Which I think is good, because that's the sort of rider that would get snapped up by a team. And I'm sure there are probably teams trying to maybe even buy her out of her contract, depending on the situation. But it would be good if she stays where she is.
To be fair, they might get a World Tour license if they were keen on it.
I think that's their plan. They want to apply for that.
Yeah.
They're 17th in the standings right now. So in the combined standings for relegation / promotion, with the only team above them is Volkswagen, and there's a real chance that they will finish the year in the top 15.
Yeah, they I think when they started the team, that was the sell to the riders. It's to get them World Tour by 26, 27.
We had drama in the racing, and we had drama in the world of women's cycling externally, with the UCI dropped a bomb of news on Thursday, Friday at the end of the week. One of them is going to be How Good's Minute of Madness, and one of them was a story that I decided to take on myself about a new handlebar minimum width. The UCI announced that as of January 1st, 2026, the handlebar width has to be 400 millimeters, 40 centimeters, with a 38 shifter. And so basically, once that news was released, the women's peloton lost their minds, because like 90% of them ride narrower than 400 millimeter bars. There are some really notable ones that you would look at them and you'd be like, yeah, she definitely is not going to fit on a 400 millimeter bar, like Niamh Fisher-Black, who posted a photo on Instagram of her shoulders being measured. There's also, Amanda Spratt, obviously Gaia Rialini, who is tiny, tiny, tiny person. But most of the women, their shoulder width, it would be uncomfortable and potentially more dangerous to ride wider bars. I actually had a chat with Lieselot, who's the director of performance at FDJ-Suez, and we talked a bit about this. So here's that conversation for you. basically this handlebar possible rule change. When it was announced, I was just chatting with some of the riders, and it seemed like people felt like the women's peloton wasn't really considered when a blanket measurement was given. So I was trying to reach out to teams to ask about, like if their riders ride narrower handlebars, or like how various teams feel about the the rule change for next year.
Well, I think first of all, how I understand where it comes from in the men's peloton, being, like we just try to be more aero all the time. And, first, they change the degrees of the handlebars, and then they limit, of the shifters. And then they limit that, of course, for safety reasons. And then, just if you can decrease your frontal area by, shrugging your shoulders and riding a really, really narrow handlebar as a man, of course you're going to get faster, but that goes to a penalty of safety. I understand that. Mm-hmm. So I understand, that the UCI, it's a concern. But at the same time, of course, the anatomy of the female athlete is completely different. And, it's just like they completely didn't think about that, in my opinion. Yeah, I mean, I was chatting with a journalist from Belgium yesterday, and I was just thinking out of the box, and I'm like, yeah, but for time trialing, you have a rule for someone who's 180 or 190 that they can have, different rules. If they want to optimize safety, they could have also thought about, maybe we just have a database with, the shoulders of the width of the shoulders of each athlete. And, depending on the width of your shoulders, you can have a 38 or a 36 even, or a 40 handlebars. And then at least, they can talk about, or they can take care of the safety, but then they don't penalize, all the whole female bunch, who's, who just has smaller or more narrow shoulders. So yeah, maybe that is something to think about. I mean, that was just something that I was thinking, but yeah, for sure, it makes no sense to for the majority of the women to go to 40. And to answer your question, and I don't know if that's off the record or on the record, but we looked a little bit at for OR, and I mean 17 out of our 18 riders, they are on more narrow handlebars than 40. So that actually affects almost our complete team.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because the statement that we got from Adam Hansen, who's obviously on the board for Safer, was that when they measured handlebars at the Tour Down Under, only one rider had handlebars narrower than 40. But if almost all your team, and also Little Trek, has narrower handlebars, then clearly that measurement that's not a true statement.
No, and then that's not representable for what is really going on. Yeah. I
mean, they have a database for the height. Every rider has to tell the UCI how tall they are. So measuring shoulders is really not that big of an ask.
No. I mean, that would for me like be the logical approach. But yeah, I think that's up to the UCI, of course, to think about that.
And like, as director of performance, how do you see like a force change for 98% of your team? What would that like do to their performance and like their bodies, really?
It's for sure it's going to make them slower, because you just increase your frontal area. That's one thing, but it's also just, even like you want to be, this measure is to be more safe. And I understand that, for men who should be maybe on a 40, on a 42, going to 36, it's probably not the safest in terms of handling your bike. But then for a girl riding on a 40, if you're actually should be on a 38 or even a 36, I mean that's also not going to improve the safety. So it's not just performance related, but also going too wide, for sure. That's not just bike handling skills. That's not going to improve with this rule, for sure, if you look at the women's peloton.
Yeah, it does feel like a little bit of a cop out to say it's for like the safety of the peloton in terms of handling.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I do understand, like in cyclocross, you don't have that issue because of course the speed is not as high, and also aerodynamics don't play a role, but also it's much more important, to have good bike handling skills. So it does affect, of course, going too narrow, it will affect your skills on the bike. But then at the same time, going too wide for the women's peloton, that's also really going the wrong direction.
Yeah, Neve Fisher-Black said that if she has to go to 40 bars, then that the amount that her bars will stick out wider than her body would be way less safe than riding narrower bars.
Yeah, for sure, absolutely. So my advice to the UCI, but it's not like I'm considered, but my advice would for sure just be, just measured and have a database, not just with the length, but also with the width of the shoulders, and then they can make rules based on that. But well, let's see. I hope that it's not the last thing that has been said about this topic.
Yeah. Do you think you've ridden in the bunch, you know what it's like. Do you think that is there anything they can do that's like a better option to try to make it safer, some stamp that they can put on that would do what they're trying to do, but in a way that it actually considers the rider's well-being?
You mean in safety in general, or just about this handlebars situation?
Safety in general, because it seems like they're trying to like slap like some rule on it that's going to be like, hey, this will fix our safety problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
but they've missed the mark with what they've decided to do.
Yeah, but I think there's really not, like, if there would be one solution or one measure, that would improve the safety of our sport, that's just not, like, it's more than that. Of course, there's plenty of things that we should consider, and I also don't have I also don't have the answer. I think there's for sure, and I'm also confident with Safer. It's smart people also in there, so for sure they are thinking out of the box also. But for sure, this one is not necessarily the one, especially for the women's peloton. It's not the right measure in my opinion, but I can only hope that they keep thinking and they keep brainstorming about other measures to take.
So as she said, 17 of their 18 riders would have to change bars, and the same goes to Visma Leasebike, who said that I think it was 14 of their 18 rider roster or something like that would have to change bars. The most shocking thing I think about the story that I wrote with the help of Georgie was the statement made by Adam Hansen about how they measured the bars of the women at Tour Down Under and UAE Tour, and only one had bars narrower than 400 millimeters. I'm not really sure how they're measuring the bars to come to that conclusion, but there's definitely a lot of questions around this rule when it comes to the women's peloton specifically, but it also affects like the juniors. I think there's a lot of clarification that the UCI needs to say before we can like really understand where this rule, how they think that this rule is going to help with safety at all.
I find it so rich, and I think it's already been brought up in the Discord, that in that wonderful 14-minute voice note that I got from Adam, that he said he was the first guy in the peloton to ride with narrow bars. And I was like, okay. And this was after he told me in no uncertain terms that there was pretty sure there was none, or at least one handlebar that was smaller than 400 millimeters when they measured them at 3 occasions, which was TDU, Milano San Remo, and another race which he couldn't remember.
Which we've disproven because we know from Trek that both Spratty and Neve, so that's 2, but also the entire FDJ team. So
so I think like the absolute broad brush approach to this rule is completely insensitive and does not reflect the current state of cycling. As we saw from the comments from Ken Ballhouse's Sync Ergonomics, it is not like, it's a minute having a guidelines like this is good, but the minimum guideline is not fit for purpose for the current state of the peloton, and it's not cognizant of the different body types in the peloton as well. So Yeah, I think like if I look at who made the decision, and it was this SAFE R, so SAFE with capital letter R at the end, and they're the subcommittee of the UCI where they look at creating more safer peloton, and like they do things like troll Twitter, and they're trying to collect data on what causes crashes for the past like 10, 15 years. They're still accumulating that data. When I last checked in with them in March this year, when I was writing the article about risk, so they still haven't completed that data set, and it will take months for them to do that, and yet they think, oh, okay, well, we need to do something because things are happening, so we need to put in this new rule. So what's going to slow down the peloton? We'll make the handlebars wider, because according to Adam, it increases aerodynamic drag, slows down the peloton. It also increases handling of the bike. But what they don't realize is this is actually a knock health and safety issue, in the sense that as a cyclist, you spend up to 30 hours a week riding that bike in that position. You will not ride a different bike in training that you will do in racing. So if you have to ride a race legal bike at the race, of course you're going to do that in training, because otherwise it's jumping on a wholly unfamiliar machine. And if you're a rider like Niamh Fisher-Black, Guy Riolini, even like Ella Wiley at Jayco, like you're opening yourself up to a huge amount of injury, which we talked about in the article. And it's just these women have to do their job safely and sustainably, and this is not cognizant of that at all.
I mean, it's like trying to slap like a leaf on a bullet hole.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many other things that they can look at. One of the writers anonymously told us that she's like it's like someone forgot to hand in their paperwork and they just decided to put something in last minute.
Well, you said that, yeah, the opening it all this up for injury and for like decreased safety for women, but the UCI is also opening themselves up to cases of
lawsuits,
workplace injury, or even discrimination cases. A case, I should say. So it's opened up a whole can of worms. It's not just about the handlebars, is it? And something else, two things I've picked out from the articles and the comments. One, there was a comment on your article, Abby, from one of the readers, and someone was asking, doesn't Adam only represent men in the CPA? And the answer is no. The CPA have represented women since arguable timeline on that one.
Yeah, to be fair though, I didn't know that either as a writer who only retired last year, and I was only told a month ago by Grace Brown that part of my prize money went to the CPA.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so one of the reasons why the Cyclist Alliance started, thanks to Iris Slappendell, was that she had been on a couple of boards and committees in her time, a couple of those in the UCI. She's also had experience working with CPA, and she could see that women's cycling was always going to be the last agenda item on any important meeting. And she realized that we needed that independent union to represent the interests of women's cycling, because some of our issues, or most of our issues, are actually independent of men's cycling. And if we're never going to be addressed in the first place, we're not going to even be able to tackle the bigger issues, let alone the smaller ones in our sport. So that was a huge reason why she started the Cyclist Alliance and got people like myself on board in those early days to kind of figure it all out. In that short space of time where we launched the Cyclist Alliance, the CPA came and said, oh, we represent women's cycling too, and we're going to have an arm for women's cycling. And we thought, okay, great, can we work together? And the answer was always no. They have never ever wanted to work with the Cyclist Alliance, because we can actually be complementary rider representative organizations. They're not technically unions per se, but they work as unions. The CPA is a union for men's cycling, but it's you couldn't quite distinguish that for women's cycling. And this case is actually a really great example of why collective bargaining agreements they are very important for unions, because unity is really the gold standard of how you get changes to happen in the first place and how you make them stick. And the women's peloton it's never unified. It never has been. And we would like it to be. Regardless of how that really happens, the Cyclist Alliance is just a tool for that. And that they've always had the goal of trying to promote ideas and promote women to think more broadly about the whole sport, not just themselves and their career or the threat of losing that career. So even though it's just such a small change in the rules, this stupid handlebar rule, it's hopefully a good catalyst for a lot of riders to go, oh, we have a lot more power if we work together on a problem. And this is a small problem, really. Like, it could have some big consequences, sure, but there's actually bigger problems that we need to be fixing. So can this be a moment that we can put our heads above the waterline just for a little bit and work together, however that may end up looking, and realize that the riders actually have so much power in this? And Kate Verono raised that point really well as well. And I think that was such a great thing to highlight in the article, Abby, because we can't force change if there's just a couple of voices making noise. Like, if the 100% of the riders turn up with handlebars that are not compliant, what are they going to do? I think that would be a super interesting experiment. And then what does that mean for other issues in the women's peloton going forward?
I mean, I really have to thank Georgie for help with that piece. It wouldn't have come together without her. And I think, just really quick, Loren, on the before you make your point on the topic of TCA, their rider survey is going on right now. So if you are a rider listening to this podcast, then you can find the Cyclist Alliance on Instagram, and they've linked the survey, and take their yearly rider survey, because the data is really important that they're able to gather. Over to you, Loren.
No, I didn't have anything else to add to you three, because I think you all covered it brilliantly as per usual. But my point was, just listening to Gracie, is I wonder, since the start of the TCA in 2017, we don't need to go on too long about this, but has there been more buy-in from the riders and like the bigger names? Like, because what comes to mind with me is riders like Demi Vollering, who have such a presence and such a voice. If we think of what, and I always go back to Ilona Maher with rugby, what she's doing for that sport. And you have these characters. We've seen it in women's football with pink hair, love her.
Megan Rapinoe.
Megan Rapinoe and her partner as well with basketball. You've got these people who can really be the catalyst for this change. And I don't know if Demi's actually the right person to bring together the peloton, but I'm just saying she has this platform. And I would just love to see more of that coming from these people.
I think always the fear with anything when it comes to like UCI and riders sticking their head up is that you've always got to kind of follow the money, particularly when you don't have as much power in your contract negotiations as well, and particularly in sports like cycling where contracts are so frequent. Like, as in you, like 2-year contract, 1-year contract. I mean, Loren, you know, as an agent, it's really tough, and it's and you can just piss off a general manager who is in the pocket of the UCI in some way or another, they're wrapped up in some way. So, like, there is that as a risk, but I think if there's always power in numbers, and it's a cause that's worthy to support. And you've also, like we see with like Lieselot's voice note, that there is support in the teams themselves. And I think they do have the power to go up against the big money in the sport to force this change.
I mean, I think that what you're saying is that we need to get Reusser sponsored by like Adidas, and then put a microphone in front of her.
Marlen, you can reach out to me at How Good. I can help you out with this. We can broker this deal.
Actually, her shoulders are like, she rides.
It's a good point though, actually, in that it's not just about the riders, this particular issue, actually, because it does come down to money. If all of the teams have to replace 50% plus of one major part of the componentry, like, that's a pretty substantial cost. It's more work for the mechanics. Like, there's a whole kind of flow-on effect to this rule change that's not just about the rider's physiology and the consequences of that. So I think, you know, sometimes an issue that comes out of left field and isn't necessarily one of the bigger issues of our sport is not a bad thing, because it kind of promotes a lot of people to want to get up and do something about it.
Yeah, I think so. And like, I think it was highlighted actually by Ken's comment in the article that people, particularly people on smaller teams, like how are they going to fund this change? And then you think about the broader cycling community at large. Like all of a sudden, handlebars no smaller than 400 millimeters are going to be sold in bike shops, and that also like completely isolates a segment of the market, be it small females and small men. When we're already struggling to get women on bikes at the moment as it is. So I think it's a fairly tone-deaf implementation. And literally, I do agree with that anonymous rider who said someone just wanted to put something in at last minute and they forgot. So they put this in.
Well, I think we can kind of pivot to a bit of, well, in my opinion, good news. And that's one of the other things that were in the UCI's big bundle of fun that they dropped last week, and that is that the Giro, the women's Giro, is going to finally move away from the men's Tour de France. Since 1990, I think the women's Giro has overlapped with the first week of the men's Tour de France, and that has meant that it's been basically invisible with the hype around the men's race. So the UCI released the calendars for next year, a couple of TBDs with the Aussie races, but the women's Giro will now overlap with the final 2 days of the men's Giro. So it moves many weeks forward in the calendar and is going to be a May, early June slot instead of the first week of July like we'll see this year. And that brings us to the newest segment of the pod. Okay, Georgie, you ready? All right, 3, 2, 1, go.
Ladies and gentlemen, the women have their own week of panache in Italy. They have moved away from they have moved away from the men's Tour de France, and the Giro d'Italia Donna has its own segment in the calendar. It is a standalone event, and we will see finally the best of the best riders competing at all 3 Grand Tours feasibly from 2026 onwards. So that means you get to see the drama that we talked about with the likes of Demi Vollering and Marlen Reusser battling it out. You got Elisa Longoborghini going for the pink jersey, and she could also go for the yellow jersey at the Tour de France. So we have increased targets for these big riders. This may impact the British bloc, but a different rider type will compete in those races over across the ocean there with the fish and chips. And this will also target a brand new fan base in Italy, and that is women. We want more women on bikes, and we'll get a lot of women coming to this race. Our women get to race on the climbs that are typically just sequestered for the men's Giro d'Italia, and it will be a fantastic spectacle. I can't wait to watch, and that is 1 minute.
This is definitely my new favorite segment. Yeah.
Oh, that was good.
I mean, we could make it longer than a minute, but the minute of madness just rolled off the tongue,
Yeah, it's good, and it's a bit of pressure. I'm not known for cutting down my words, so this is good. It keeps me to task.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've for years and years we've complained about the fact that the women's Giro overlaps the first week of the men's tour. It could be literally any race on the calendar, and it overlapping the tour, men's or women's, and overlapping the tour means that it just is forgotten about because of how big the men's Tour de France is. And the Giro, up until 3 years ago, it was the biggest race that the women had, stage race that the women had. And as the sport has grown, and I wrote about this in the newsletter this week, the Wheel Talk newsletter, if you don't know, it exists, that as the sport has grown and more eyes have been on the women's side of the sport, and as coverage has grown, I feel like I've seen more and more complaints about the placement of the Giro on the calendar, and I've never once thought, okay, they'll change it. Like, I've never once considered a possibility that the UCI and the organizers of the Giro would come together and move the women's Giro until RCS came on as the organizers of the women's Giro last year. And we already saw last year that the organization of the race was so much better. The presentation of the route was earlier. Just everything having to do with the race was more professional. And I think that one of the biggest benefits when we look back on this in 5-10 years of RCS taking over the women's Giro is going to be the fact that they want to move it to better align with their men's race. And so it's going to be the last 2 stages will overlap with the men's Giro and the women's Giro, which is great because, I mean, in my opinion, the Giro is often a better spectacle than the Tour de France for the men, and we'll be coming off the back of hopefully 3 weeks of really exciting racing for the men where people are getting like coming a little down, and we'll be able to hype back up into the women's Giro. So I think it's a really, really awesome move. I'm really excited about it. I can't wait to see what it does to further develop the sport of women's cycling. And mostly, I just cannot wait to not have to fight tooth and nail to get coverage of the women's Giro in front of people's faces during the men's Tour de France.
That was longer than a minute, but I'll give it to you.
It's not my minute of madness.
No, you're right. It's the women finally have their own stage, and I am dead serious. Like we might actually get to see someone do the triple, like properly do the triple, in the years to come in women's cycling, and that's going to be a wicked crown. Like as in like they can peak for the welter, well, kind of peak for the welter. It's a little cousin, but do well at the welter, peak at the Giro, peak at the Tour. Yeah, that could be a really cool thing to see.
Well, Annemiek got the triple crown, but I don't know if...
Yeah, I know, but like in the new era. Annemiek
era.
In the post-Annemiek era.
Yeah, no, I get it. No, I think that it was good to give credit to RCS as well. Like, I think they're actually, much like the Flanders Classics, putting their money where their mouth is for women's cycling and doing quite a good job there. And not just being flexible, but seeing opportunity and seeing the value in it. So, yeah, kudos to them, and kudos to a woman that I really enjoyed working with at RCS, Martina Centomo. She is the partner of Jai Hindley as well, but she does a great job there. And the people that I got to work with briefly when I did one race with them I was quite impressed, and they just seem to manage things like they would manage a men's race with not much surprise around, this is going better than we thought. The kind of reactions we were getting at the first time at the first new version of the women's tour with ASO, they looked quite surprised how well it was all going. Yeah.
Well, this has been a long one today, and we still have our obsessions to comment on real quick, but we do have a World Tour race this weekend. It is the first ever edition of the Copenhagen Sprint, a 151 kilometer sprint race. There's some little hills thrown in there, but all likelihood it's going to be the best of the sprinters. So probably another Lorena Wiebes win, but we'll see. And the next time we chat, it'll be about the Giro, but definitely catch the Copenhagen Sprint this weekend. All right. Oh my God. We just had a ton to talk about this week. Let's wrap it up with obsessions. Loren had to go. She has a real job. So she had to go, and she wants us to say that her obsession is Call Me Alex, the 2-part Call Me Daddy mini series on, I think she said Max or Apple, but it is one of the pluses. It's about the Call Me Daddy Alex Cooper. No, that's a soccer player.
Alex Cooper.
That was right. Sick. Alex Cooper, who does the Call Me Daddy podcast, which is a fantastic podcast, even if she did have my nemesis on recently, who is freaking incredibly likable these days. And even I am starting to like her, which is really annoying. I've harbored a grudge for 30 years. Dakota Johnson.
50 Shades of Grey.
It's really hard to be in the materialist era right now as the nemesis of Dakota Johnson. She doesn't know, obviously, probably. But we went to like elementary school together for a time, and we were at a petting zoo, and I was holding a bunny, and she came and took the bunny out of my arms, and I've been scarred ever since.
Oh, so. Wow. So it's like a proper, like, personal affront. That's, because I was like 30 years. What did she do? What bad Disney show was she in? But wow.
Stole a bunny.
It was IRL. That's a good story.
Stole a bunny out of my arms. Well, my obsession this week is all things Haim, because their new album I Quit is out on Friday. So I am really excited about that. So I've been listening to all their old albums. Women in Music Part 3 is just banger after banger, and I am really excited for Friday.
Nice. I'm obsessed with Issa Rae. I didn't really know a lot about her or see much of her work before she was in Barbie, and she had such a great screen presence in that movie, and she just really stuck with me a little bit. So I just started like trying to figure out what else she'd done. And I've been watching her show that she's written and produced and starred in called Insecure. And it's so good. And she is so talented. And it's just a really well done show. And a great music choices, good soundtrack too. So I always appreciate that on TV and movies.
She's the president, right?
Yeah.
My obsession this week is my algorithm on Instagram is just feeding me all these like beautiful skiing, like backcountry skiing videos. And so my obsession is, I guess, like a wish that I can go skiing soon. Because now it's no longer in a contract that I have to sign that I can't go skiing, and I haven't skied in very many years. Well, since 2019. My dad and I always talk about going to Japan on like a shoestring budget and like stay like hostels and eat a lot of sushi and just go skiing during the day and drink sake at night.
Yeah, you got to do it. That was probably one of my favorite things when I retired. Is I I got a full season pass to the snow, and it was awesome.
Yeah, I really want to get the fat skis and just go hit some powder, because I grew up skiing, and it's just something that, you know, when you're a pro athlete, like when I was in rowing, I couldn't ski, and you kept cycling, you just can't ski. Have never tried snowboarding because I just get a wet butt all day. Yeah, I'm with you, Abby. That's my face too. Except they do walk a lot easier. Like the ski boots are a pain in the butt.
Hey, if Lila can walk in ski boots, you can walk in ski boots.
Have you seen me? I look like look like I'm in like some like 1920s music video. Like
she looks like a duck in boots.
That is me. Yeah, it's good. That's my next tattoo idea.
A duck in boots. I would say you should come visit me in the winter, but Andorra has been just like grim with the skiing the last couple of years.
Yeah, no, I think I'll head up to Japan. No jet lag.
Damn.
Sorry. I will still come visit you.
Well, thanks everyone so much for listening. This has been a long one, but we had a heck of a lot to unpack. We'll be back next week to count down even more to the Giro. It's coming. And I've just locked in audio diaries from friend of the pod, Sarah Gigante, as well. So definitely going to have some fun hot takes on the dailies.
This episode was produced, edited, and mixed by Will Jones at Red Bricks Media.